Don't insult me publicly.
I think is, frankly, demeaning to your responsibilities and your job. With that, I'll yield back.
I am never going to talk about conversations, advice
you
in
asked
any
for-
way.
Pam Bondi collapsed after getting caught brainwashing Congress. Honestly, it's almost impressive how far she went to avoid accountability. Instead of answering questions, she dodged, deflected, and played the victim. Who knew that avoiding the truth could look so professional?
I sent you a letter last week along with my Republican counterpart, Chairman Brian Stile, requesting an increase in federal prosecutory resources to address threats against members.
She walked into Congress expecting to control the narrative, but the questions she faced quickly unraveled her polished image. The first cracks appeared when Congressman Morelli raised the issue of threats against members of Congress. In 2024 alone, the U.S. Capitol Police identified nearly 9,500 threats against lawmakers.
Federal prosecutory resources to address threats against members of Congress, particularly in light of what happened last week in Minnesota, that tragedy. In 2024, the U.S. Capitol Police identified and received nearly 9,500 concerning statements or threats against members. Federal prosecutors have only secured 8 convictions so far, and the heightened threat environment demands an all-hands-on-deck approach.
Yet out of those thousands of threats, federal prosecutors had secured only 8 convictions. 8. The gap between threats made and actual accountability was staggering, and Morelli wasn't going to let that slide.
Will you commit to assigning an assistant U.S. attorney or a special assistant U.S. attorney in each of the 94 federal districts to, at least on a part-time basis, investigate and prosecute threats against members of Congress?
So he pressed her. His demand was straightforward and practical. Assign a federal prosecutor, at least part-time, in each of the 94 federal districts to handle these cases. It wasn't some wild proposal. It was a clear plan of action, a plan that could have sent a strong signal. The government was serious about protecting its representatives.
We are involved in that. The FBI was involved. Our U.S. attorneys are involved. Many of these are district to district. So the way we're doing that is, I will tell you, my National Security Division is involved.
But Bondi's response was anything but clear. Instead of a firm commitment, she offered vague reassurances. She said the FBI was involved, that the National Security Division met every morning to discuss these issues.
I've spoken to Governor Shapiro. We are working hand in hand, our U.S. attorney, with the district attorney there, hand in hand, just like in Minnesota.
She mentioned talks with Minnesota officials and with Pennsylvania's governor, Josh Shapiro.
Political party doesn't matter when something like this happens.
She stressed that political party doesn't matter. It sounded good on paper, but it didn't answer the question. Would she commit to placing prosecutors in every district? She wouldn't. Instead, she floated the idea of continuing the conversation in a secure facility. To anyone watching, that felt less like leadership and more like a stall tactic.
Several defendants who received presidential pardons related to that day are now arguing in court that the pardon covers crimes like, for instance, illegal firearm possession discovered in a search of an individual's home in California months after January 6th. What's your position on whether the pardons cover these separate offenses?
Then the subject shifted. Presidential pardons. January 6th. And the tension in the room only grew. Morelli's question cut to the heart of the issue. Did the pardons given to January 6 defendants also cover crimes committed outside of that day? It was a critical legal question, one that demanded a straight answer from the nation's top law enforcement officer.
The pardon power rests with the president, not the Department of Justice, and some of that is pending litigation.
But instead of clarity, Bondi swerved. She brought up Hunter Biden. She referenced unrelated commutations. She tried every move, except answering the question in front of her.
Further said, in its effect, the granting of a pardon is in no sense the overturning of a judgment of conviction. It is an executive action that mitigates or sets aside punishment. So as the chief law enforcement officer, what's your opinion?
Morelli pressed again. He reminded her, the Constitution grants the power of pardons to the president, but as Attorney General, she was sworn to uphold the law. Did she believe those pardons extended to other crimes or not?
Well, the people that were on death row, I've met with those families.
No,
all of those sentences were commuted. I'm not going to comment on pardons on either side of the aisle.
A simple yes or no would have sufficed, but Bondi refused.
This is a serious topic, and for you to suggest that you don't have an opinion or to divert to other things that had nothing to do with January 6th pardons.
Her refusal didn't go unnoticed. Morelli called it out directly, accusing her of filibustering and dodging responsibility. His frustration captured the moment perfectly. Here was the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, unable or unwilling to stand on legal ground when it mattered most. What should have been an opportunity for Bondi to project authority instead exposed her as something else entirely. Not a guardian of justice, but a political shield. And in that chamber, under that questioning, the shield began to crack. When the focus returned to the January 6th pardons, Pam Bondi's polished responses finally began to crumble.
Did you have any advice for the president when he came forward with the blanket pardon on January?
The lawmaker cut straight to the question that mattered. Did she advise the president before he granted those pardons? It was a yes or no inquiry, but Bondi refused to confirm or deny.
I am not going to discuss any conversations
That's a
that
no.
I have had with it.
And
You just put
your
words in
own
my
word.
mouth.
She sidestepped. She dodged. She repeated the same refusal. Members accused her of stonewalling, of giving non-answers when clarity was needed most. This was the moment her loyalty was laid bare. Instead of showing commitment to the rule of law or to the officers who had suffered, Bondi chose to protect the president. She put his interests above the nation's, above democracy itself. And under that spotlight, her silence spoke louder than any admission ever could. But the blows didn't stop there. What followed was even more brutal. A takedown focused squarely on corruption.
The three hallmarks of this administration are incompetence, corruption, and cruelty. I'm going to focus today on corruption. And in my mind, there are two types of corruption: personal, and then the other I'm going to call public.
One congresswoman laid out what she called the three hallmarks of the administration: incompetence, corruption, and cruelty. And she wasn't vague. She pointed directly at Bondi as the embodiment of those traits. She carved the issue into two parts. On one side, personal corruption, her financial dealings, her lobbying history, her foreign ties, already raising eyebrows. On the other side, public corruption, her role in shielding Trump, in bending the Justice Department's credibility, in helping normalize abuses of power.
Have you ever been registered as an agent of a foreign principal under the Foreign Agents Registration Act?
I assume you're talking about when I represented the country of Qatar for a very short time.
The
Hold
answer is
on.
yes. No,
Hold
excuse
on.
me.
No.
No.
For anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. Anti-human trafficking
or
for the
no?
World Cup.
Attorney
You can't
General.
put words in my mouth.
No.
You want to talk about incompetence? You're the one that
Excuse
said
me.
Joe Biden on PBS was competent. You had to retract those words.
Mr.
The attack reframed the entire hearing. Up to this point, Bondi could claim incompetence or say she simply didn't want to comment on pending issues. But this new line of questioning shifted the ground beneath her. It was no longer about incompetence, it was about intent. She wasn't just dodging, she was manipulating. She wasn't just avoiding tough questions, she was complicit, part of a deliberate effort to warp Congress and shield the administration from scrutiny. That's why the word corruption landed with such force. It connected the dots. Her evasions on pardons, her vague answers on threats, her silence on accountability. The hearing took a sharp turn when Pam Bondi admitted something that left lawmakers stunned. Under pressure, she confirmed she had been a registered foreign agent for the country of Qatar. She tried to soften the admission, claiming it was anti-human trafficking work tied to the World Cup. But the room wasn't buying it. Members pointed out it hadn't been clearly disclosed during her Senate confirmation. Bondi insisted it was buried in her ethics paperwork, even citing page 25 of her filings. But by then, the damage was done. It left one impression: that the nation's attorney general had ties to a foreign government while sitting in one of the most powerful seats in Washington. And that wasn't the only uncomfortable moment.
President Trump recently announced he'd accept that $400 million Qatar airplane because it was just prettier than the one he was flying around in. Is it true that you gave advice that this was legally permissible?
The questioning quickly turned to Trump's luxury jet, a $400 million airplane provided by Qatar. Lawmakers demanded to know, had Bondi signed off on the deal?
I will not discuss any advice that my Office of Legal Counsel gives to the President of the United States on any matter.
It was her chance to clear the air, but instead she hid behind secrecy. She refused to disclose whether her Office of Legal Counsel had approved it or even if she had recused herself. That refusal only deepened suspicion that she was both conflicted and complicit.
His son recently launched the Executive Branch Club, a private club with $500,000 memberships here in D.C. Any of this seem like it might be a problem, might be profiteering?
Then came the swirl of financial scandals. While the Department of Justice quietly disbanded the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, Trump's son launched an exclusive executive branch club in Washington, charging $500,000 for membership. The overlap was glaring, dismantling oversight on one hand, opening the door for profiteering on the other. Lawmakers pressed her. Did she see the conflict?
What I would be concerned about in Pennsylvania are all the child sex cases that we've prosecuted.
Bondi didn't address it. Instead, she shifted to child sex cases in Pennsylvania, an unrelated topic that looked less like concern and more like a tactic to shut down scrutiny.
Isn't it true that on April the 2nd, the same day that Trump announced his chaotic tariff regime that plummeted the stock market, you sold more than $1 million worth of your shares in Trump Media stock? Trump Media stock fell 13%.
But the final blow came with the stock market scandal. On April 2nd, Trump announced new tariffs that rattled the markets. Within hours, Bondi allegedly sold off more than $1 million worth of Trump Media stock. In the days that followed, the stock price fell by 13%. To lawmakers, the timing looked far too convenient, as if she had cashed out just before the losses hit.
I complied with my ethics, and yeah, I would take a class in financial literacy if you think I profited from that, because I lost a tremendous amount of money.
Her response didn't help her case. Instead of calmly explaining, she lashed out, mocking members of Congress, telling them they needed a financial literacy class. Then she claimed she had actually lost a tremendous amount of money, a defense that sounded weak and desperate. This was the moment her composure cracked. All the careful evasions, all the deflections to other topics, all the vague reassurances, none of it could protect her anymore. The Qatar ties, the jet, the crypto conflicts, the suspicious stock sale. Together, they painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. By the end of it, she looked cornered, compromised, and collapsing under the weight of her own contradictions.